Do you believe the government has technology today that is using science that we don't know?
The Germans had anti-gravity vehicles back in 1934. We've had these advanced technologies for a long time.
It's crazy to think, how did they put together something like this?
The media is their most powerful weapon against the people. And of course, part of that agenda is keeping the people ignorant of these advanced technologies and the fact that the secret space program even exists.
Hello, everybody. This is Paolo. We've done a lot of conversations on artificial intelligence until now, but in the summer of 2021, there was quite a bit of important news that came up. And basically, the defense side of the Pentagon has certified that they have encountered a area phenomenon. Let's say that it seems that these are technological devices that display characteristics, things like acceleration or maximum speed that is several times above what is possible from also the most advanced spacecraft. But particularly, they have admitted that these things exist, that these things, they have measured them, that they have scientific measurements that verify that they exist. Now, regardless of what they are, there are various speculations, mostly three types of things. One is these are secret technology from US government. The other one is these are alien technologies. The other thing is these are ourselves coming from the future. More or less, these are the three theories, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that I would say it's a big moment in which we become aware that there is a lot more. The history isn't finished. The human knowledge isn't finished. There is a lot more that we need to know. So with that in mind, invited somebody that is really an interesting person of many respect, because he has been able to work both in science and on some of this, he's been part of some of this secret, if you like, military communication, where he was once witness of one of these things going on. And so he has a unique perspective because on the one hand, he's working in the military. On the other hand, he's had a long career investigating a number of what's called suppressed science, and we will see what that is during the interview. So with me today, we have Dan Willis. Hello, Dan. How are you today?
Good. It's great to join you in our effort to disclose these hidden truths. My background involvement in this, I had high-level top secret security clearance in naval communications, and way back in 1969, I was receiving classified secret reports of extraterrestrial craft coming out, reported by U.S. Navy ships going to Chief of Naval Operations. This seeded my interest in it, and in the year 2001, I joined 20 witnesses backed by over 500 military witnesses at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., May 9th, 2001. In front of 22 cameras in the mainstream media of the world, we all gave our testimony, willing to testify under oath before a congressional hearing. My testimony was minor compared to the other witnesses, talking about 57 different species already categorized by 1989. We had faster than light craft built back in the 1950s, NASA airbrushing UFOs out before releasing the public, President's CIA directors being denied access.
So you already said that basically there was this experience where you have intercepted a communication, a secret communication that was talking about a UFO, a ship as seen in Alaska. Let me ask you this. A UFO is part of human technology or something else completely?
Probably more than half is made in USA. Lockheed Martin, they have a lot of a technology that's available. You have to understand history that's been not commonly taught in our education system, that the Germans had anti-gravity vehicles back in 1934. We developed anti-gravity by October of 1954, 20 years later. This goes into a long history with Eisenhower administration and everything, but we've had these advanced technologies for a long time. In fact, the event that I participated in back in 2001 and inspired a hacker in the UK, Gary McKinnon, who discovered the solar war in US Navy's secret space program in the computers. And so since that time, we've had many witnesses coming forth being involved. And that program launched back in the 1980s. So what the public is aware of and what is going on in these classified projects is two totally different things.
Do you believe the government has technology today that is using science that we don't know?
Undoubtedly. I've interviewed many of these secret space program 20 and back people that have had firsthand experience with these technologies. They have anti-gravity, technology that is far beyond what the public or even our normal military is aware of. There's advanced technologies that have been developed and are not available to the public.
Do you believe in the ability of minds to communicate without speech?
Well, I've experienced it myself. I studied metaphysics deeply, and there's scientific evidence behind it.
So do you believe we can communicate with somebody far away from here?
Yeah, absolutely. The National Science Foundation has put out information regarding quantum entanglement, quantum communications, whereas you have a photon and you have another one that's entangled with it, and it can be on another galaxy, on another planet, and be able to communicate. With electromagnetic communications, which I'm very familiar with being a broadcast engineer, you have a couple of difficult situations. You have the inverse square law of distance, whereas the radiation decreases over a period of time. You have the limitation of the speed of light. You have the problems with biological incompatibility, as people use cell phones. The brain tumors on the right side of the head escalated ever since people started using. And there's a lot of indications that these electromagnetic broadcasts are not compatible with biological systems. So if we were to switch our communications over to quantum entanglement communications, the distance would not be a factor because the nature of the universe is entangled. So any place in the universe you can communicate with the quantum entanglement.
Can you tell us a little bit about what they discovered about the consciousness and about this concept of interrelationship between consciousness and crystals?
Yeah, Dr. Marcel Vogel, IBM's head scientist, I worked with him back in the 1980s. He set up a laboratory after he retired from IBM. He had hundreds of patents. He was a creative genius. We started studying the effects of the interface of consciousness and mind with the elements of quartz crystals and water. One of the projects I worked on was a holographic camera that could tune backwards and forwards in the time, which substantiates what such as Alex Collier describes these med beds that are used in the secret space program that can take a photograph of somebody holographically and go back to their point of conception and be able to tune through time. And when the body was at the optimal state, or at whatever particular year they wanted to bring that holographic pattern into focus, overlay it on the body, and it age reverses the person back to that point in time. Or say if a person loses their arm or leg, it can regenerate it within a matter of hours. Now, what I worked on was primitive compared to what they have in the secret space programs, but it substantiated the principles that the nature of reality that we're in is indeed holographic, and that it can be attuned to through time. And the Delaware camera that I worked on, which my notes are on marcelvogel.org, you can see that these principles have been established and that they have been developed. You can imagine with working with off-planet cultures that are thousands or millions of years in advance of us, what type of advanced technology could be developed.
What specifically Master Vogel found out, and you worked with him on this, what did you measure? Reading your webpage, I found it very interesting. You basically found some kind of relationship between thinking and really physical properties that you could measure.
Oh, this goes into probably longer than we have for time, but it started with plant communication, developed into cutting quartz crystals in such a way as to act kind of similar to like a laser to cohere thought. He was working with 24 medical doctors in the Bay Area, having incredible success with removing problems in the body that are occurring. If you understand that our body, our three-dimensional, appear to be physical body, is actually being emanated from a higher dimensional source, and to be able to go into that higher level, which forms the lower, you're able to alleviate different types of problems that are in the body that are appearing in our 3D body. He set up a full-on laboratory with electron microscope with a spectrophotometer. We were able to measure when you pulse your breath into a vial of water, we were able to measure the extra valence bands and the 3,000, 4,000 angstrom. It would change, and then you could erase it, showing, this is way before Dr. Emoto's work, that the energies of mind are being recorded, and it can be registered on the spectrophotometer. There was a lot of experiments done, and it's kind of like the beginning stages of a very advanced science.
Dr. Vogel was not the only one here in Silicon Valley that was looking at this. If you like, he started trying to see the connection between the mind and how it affected some physical systems. First, he started with the plants, then he went into the crystals, then he evolved more into this Delaware camera, and then he started to explore the curative properties of, let's say, these various crystals and so on. So it evolved over the years. But he was not the only one. There was also work that was done at the Stanford Research Institute. It's called SRI. They did something similar. They proved that if certain people can, through their thoughts, they can influence a quantum device. So somewhat, they proved again this idea connection between thoughts and quantum entanglement that seems crazy, but they kind of did it. What does this tell us?
Yeah, Stanford Research, they did a lot of research, Ego Swan, remote viewing, Andrei Prihorich, Uri Geller, who was able to substantiate, that it's not trickery, what he's doing. I'm not familiar with the full range of research that they did at SRI. I know that they were able to put holographically into a crystal in the image of the Mona Lisa. And they believe that it's a very, very fast, faster than any computer system at the time to be able to, but this was many years ago. And so, it shows promise that the crystals, are many these secret space program people have talked about the crystals that have been used in the med beds and different technologies that are in common use in these advanced technologies. It's so what we were working on was kind of the pioneering beginning days of understanding the interface of consciousness with crystals, and that the energies of mind, as Marcel used to say, are identical to those that we see in the crystallographic world. In other words, our energies of mind or thought have a geometrical quality to them, and so that's what we were working with.
If we could harness this technology today for civilians application, what would be possible for our life, for the life of human beings here on Earth?
I can't think of much that would not be affected by releasing these technologies. Just imagine if you could age reverse yourself back into your 20s and add maybe several hundred years onto your life. Just imagine if you can travel to other star systems, if you could use replicators to, out of the primordial matrix of space, be able to create anything you want. In other words, you can create food, you can create a part, you can create anything. Because when you understand, they've discovered that the periodic table of elements has a tetrahedral geometrical nature to it. In other words, the whole spectrum of matter that we know, there's nothing solid. Everything is oscillation. And if you can store Say a chocolate shake and a cheeseburger, that it's just the way you like it. You could store it into a crystal, that information, and replay it like you would replay a video or anything. But you replay it into manifestation, into the 3D world. This is how the replicators, I understand, work. It's about understanding the nature of reality that we are in and how reality can be manipulated. But this is advanced technologies that have not been taught in school. Our education, our media, our even Hollywood, everything has been giving hints and things of this type of technologies in science fiction movies. But the real thing is going on that has been not disclosed to the people of Earth.
What is the history of the witnesses, the chronology of the events? How did we come to the point to know, or at least to suspect, that this is something really real, tangible? What happened over time? What is the timeline of the events?
One of my favorite subjects, because after I testified in Washington, I didn't even know what Operation Mockingbird was. And I was like, my God, how could the explosive testimonies not change? I thought I was part of a world-changing event, but they completely sanitized it. And so for the last 2 decades, I've been deeply researching the whole history of how it came about. And to put it in there's a lot of details into this, but essentially, Nazi Germany achieved anti-gravity, has a secret space program. They escaped to Antarctica. They developed their secret space program there. They had a plan to called worldview warfare, Weltanschauungskrieg in German, to infiltrate into the United States and control our education, our media, and Hollywood and everything, to create a matrix of perception to hide these operations. While we felt we won World War II, they had their secret space program, and this is what Operation High Jump was. Admiral Byrd was defeated, and eventually, I'm making this a very long story, very, very short and concise. President Eisenhower was basically, and you have to remember the July flyover in 1952 over the Capitol building. They were intimidating the Truman and Eisenhower administration. So basically, Eisenhower had to sign a surrender agreement. The Germans achieved extra advanced technology due to a reptilian race called the Draco. And in the mid-50s, MJ-12 went behind Eisenhower's back, who was wanting to have disclosure, working with the Galactic Federation, a benevolent group that was working with the US Navy behind the scenes. And so we basically gave consent to be able to allow these beings to work in these deep underground military bases and abduct people and so forth and so on. And so what's happened is the technology that they have hidden in these secret space programs are so far advanced. And so they've kept control of the media. They've kept control of our education. Rockefeller Foundation completely rewrote the history of World War II in 1946 and hid the Nazi escape and infiltration. And so what happened was the US Navy, working with the Galactic Federation, of a benevolent group of Nordic-looking extraterrestrials. William Tompkins is one of the witnesses, is a well-documented witness that proves his background. They worked with them, and so the US Navy had developed the Solar Warden program, and it launched back in the 1980s. And so we have like 8 huge kilometers long battle cruisers, like this one behind me, basically to protect our solar system.
I think one is called La Mer.
La Mer was one of the MJ-12 members, and the USS Hillenkotter, who was Hillenkotter? Admiral Roscoe Hillenkotter. He was the first CIA director. And who else was he? He was MJ-1. He was the first MJ-12 member of the MJ-12 group that Truman set up originally. But when Eisenhower lost control, they set up a new MJ-12 group with, of all people, Allen Dulles, as MJ1, who was infamous for the Nazi infiltration, also set up the assassination directive for John F. Kennedy. And so there's this long history that the public is not aware of, that there's plenty of documents and witnesses that substantiate what I've just said.
Can you give us like a timeline of what happened really from 2002 to today? Like, how did we start to think this stuff must be true?
To answer that question, the U.S. Navy, working with the Nordic extraterrestrials, the Galactic Federation of Worlds, they developed this technology that would allow them to, I know it sounds like it's a stretch for people to imagine this kind of technology, but was able to recruit them around age 17, put them on a separate timeline for 20 years in service in space. And then at the end of their 20-year service duty, they age reverse and time reverse them back to their point of enlistment. So as if nothing ever happened, and erase their memory. But after 20 years passes on this timeline, people start to have total memory recall, remembering.
Because for 20 years they coexist with their alter ego in another dimension, basically.
Right. And so the Solar Warden program launched in the 1980s. What's 20 years after 1980? Around year 2000. The first witness of the secret space program of 20 years back is Michael Ralph. He came out in the year 2000, and then followed by, Randy Kramer, and there's a list goes on. And all these people having and corroborating their testimonies together that they had spent 20 years in space and talk about the same technologies and everything. Now, none of these people are able to bring back any proof and say, hey, this is proof that I can prove to this. But we have, like we mentioned, Gary McKinnon, the UK hacker, inspired by the event that I was in, was able to see the USS Hillenkotter and able to see these fleet-to-fleet transfers of non-terrestrial officers. And they wanted to put him away for 70 years in prison, and he didn't make that story up. And then you have William Tompkins.
He is basically kind of a prodigy child that was very good at making battleships when he was young, and he was recruited by the United States Navy, and he was put on a number of secret projects, and then eventually ended up at McDonnell Douglas secret project, where he was contacted by extraterrestrial. This is kind of a long story short. And they gave him basically how to design the spacecraft. And he was kind of I would call it a system engineer. He would design the full way of operating of the spacecraft and how they have to work with, how to put them in orbit, how they have to be maintained, the logistics. He did this.
Yeah, he was definitely, he had a photographic memory. He could see the secret things on the ships, and he made exact perfect little models, and Office Naval Intelligence saw this and they said, we got to get this guy in here. And so they recruited him in, and so he was working with Admiral Rico Boda at the Naval Air Station in San Diego with these 29 Navy spies that were embedded into the Nazi secret space program in Antarctica, that was coming back with reports, which he was the information disseminator. He was with the admiral's plane. He was flying to different corporations, McDonnell Douglas and universities and stuff. And we were trying to catch up. There was some of it was even hieroglyphics, with these reptilians that they were working with. So we were 20 years behind Nazi Germany. And so he also worked with NASA. In fact, he actually saw the live video feed of the alien spacecraft lined up on the far side of the crater when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin went to the moon. We were essentially warned off. That's why we didn't go back right away. And so, there's a lot of documentation behind William Tompkins to substantiate who he is. So this is probably Gary McKinnon and William Tompkins, the only physical kind of proof that we have. It's very difficult with all these witnesses, but when you have so many witnesses that are corroborating with each other, that have come forth ever since the year 2000, we don't have the full science. As Ben Rich in 1993 said, anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. We figured out an error in equations. We can take ET home, and this is what's going on in these black projects that the public's not privy to.
If people go on your website, you have really an explanation of all the chronology of this, and it's really interesting to see the chronology of these witnesses that come one after one another. I think a lot of people think that these people say, do not say the truth, that they want to look for fame and so on, but it's really unlikely that this happened. I mean, what to me stands out is the fact that you have multiple people from multiple situations in life that come up and say the same thing, have the same experience. I don't know. I don't find the same thing in phenomena where people are lying, or things like when you have collective mass group believe, the kind, those groups, religious group. This is different. This is definitely different. This sounds much more an individual experience that happens to coincide with other individual experiences that are not correlated, basically. What is the technology that you find the most intriguing, and why?
Myself, being 73 now, the med beds seem really attractive. The fact to be able to age reverse and give you several hundred years. By the time you start to figure all this out, it seems that people's bodies expire. The average age is 78, 79 years old before people last on this planet. The only way I found, Paolo, is to understand this. When I started to research back, my online notes are the webmatrix.net. It's not a professional site, but for myself, I knew all these different witness testimonies, and I became aware of many classified documents. And so what I started doing is plugging in from the year 1900 to present day, all these different authenticated classified documents that indicate what's going on behind the scenes, and all these different witness testimonies going back through time, going back many decades. And they all indicate a consistent hidden reality that's been hidden from, that's not in our education system, not in our history, that indicates what really happened behind the scenes. And that's the only way I found I was able to, some media company out of Hollywood, myself being an ex-ABC newsman and a witness, they thought I'd be a good candidate to write on the control of the mainstream media in regards to the UFO issue. And so I gladly accepted. And so, for 2 decades, I've been putting together, researching the notes over the timeline. And once you, research this, then all of a sudden it's like one, oh my God, after another. You realize that everything that you've learned, everything that you know, is far removed from the hidden truth that's been hidden from, all the people of this planet, and that an incredible world could be experienced if this veil of secrecy is lifted and these technologies released for the good of all humanity.
Governments usually, if you look at all the people that do this podcast, for example, in business, there are many, usually they are more leaning on one side of the spectrum, but all of them, in a way or another, they're telling you that government is inefficient, government is inefficient, government is inefficient. It's crazy to think, how did they put together something like this? Because this is the most efficient thing ever, like to keep secret.
I love this question because it's such an important question. Well, for one thing, it's been leaking out all over the place. But how they can't keep it secret is like when you were a child, Paolo, your parents used to watch television, right? And they'd watch the evening news, and they didn't have any reason to question what they saw on television. My parents watched Walter Cronkite on the television. They believed what the man was saying. And so as you grow into adulthood, you just naturally take that assumption along with you without having any idea that our mainstream media has been infiltrated at the highest level and centrally controlled in order to move forward a narrative that moves forward on an agenda that the public has no idea of. They hide these things. Let's say you have a small elite globalist group that are somewhat psychopathic and want to reduce the population, have a small slave force. Everything starts to make perfect sense when you have central control of the media. The media is their most powerful weapon against the people. There's billions of dollars that go in the think tank that engineer our perceptions, that engineer giving our consent. And it perpetuates because that reality is too uncomfortable for people to recognize. It takes us out of our comfort zone. And it's much easier to listen to the propaganda and say, okay, yeah, that's the way it is. Yes, that's the way it is. And to not understand that it's being centrally controlled. When the Nazis came into, like with Alan Dulles set up Operation Mockingbird in 1950, they were paying the CIA. I mean, the CIA was paying these 400 journalists to give the information. And then in 1954, instead of having public disclosure, which is what Eisenhower was planning on doing after the first contact meeting in February of 54, they set up the Bilderberg meetings. And though, along with Council of Foreign Relations and Trilateral, they control the 6 corporations that control, CNN, CBS, ABC, the whole gamut, that all have, as people notice, the similar talking points across the whole spectrum. And they centrally control this information to form the public's perceptions in order to move forward on their agenda. That is the primary function of it. And of course, part of that agenda is keeping the people ignorant of these advanced technologies and the fact that the secret space program even exists.
And you were working in top secret communication, and you basically relayed a communication from a battleship, from a U.S. Navy battleship to Washington, to Central Command, that where they were saying, we got a spacecraft here. There is a spacecraft in front of us, more or less. That is what you.
I was working at the major naval communications hub, Naval Communications Station, San Francisco. I was in charge of the code room, and I was receiving a message from a Navy ship off the coast of Alaska. The crew reported a 70-foot diameter disc that was glowing, that came out of the ocean and shot going over 7,000 miles per hour straight up into space. My testimony was minor compared to what the other witnesses were talking about bases on the other side of the moon, 57 species, on and on. Incredible technology. And then we had faster than light craft developed back in the 1950s, and that presidents, CIA directors, in fact, that's what brought about the event, was that the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff was shown a document by Dr. Stephen Greer along with astronaut Edgar Mitchell at the Pentagon, and a meeting with Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson, who was the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs. He was shown these unacknowledged special access programs that were reverse engineering extraterrestrial craft over at S4 near Area 51. And he wanted to be read, and him and his constitutional authority should have had access of anyone. In fact, he was threatened to back off, not ask any questions, or he'd be retired early and lose rank. And so he was mad as hell. And he told Dr. Greer, if you can get your people willing to testify under oath and go before the mainstream media, you have my permission. This group is, quote, illegal. And so that is what brought about the 2001 event that I testified along with. We're breaking national security oaths. We're at penalty of perjury, go before a congressional hearing to testify. And not only did I join 20 witnesses, but we were backed by over 500 military intelligence witnesses. Now, how many would it take? But if you control, it doesn't matter if you have 5,000 military intelligence
witnesses. The point is that point is the media, because the media controls the perception of what's true. First of all, control the perception of what is important to talk about.
Exactly.
And second, it controls the perception of what is true and not. You can see it
Exactly.
today on YouTube, for example. YouTube does this a lot, that they only pop up certain type of news rather than other ones. So, and that's the problem with the human mind, is that we have this thing is called, I think it's called proximity bias or relevance bias. So that basically we give importance to what is in front of us.
When we understand that the media has been infiltrated and is the enemy of the people, things will start to make sense. And they are moving forward on an agenda. You know, you have to look at Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, you know, the Event 201, and he follows with the cyber polygon about a global cyber attack and everything. Like they plan these things out to move forward on their agenda. Their agenda is basically to enslave, reduce the population and enslave the rest. And these advanced technologies would then be for just the global elite, in their club, which doesn't include the mass majority of people. That's the timeline they want to move on. And so the disclosure, if the people are awake and aware of these truths, and then that timeline, when disclosure happens and people know what the truth is, there's way more of us than there is of them. And it will move forward on a timeline that these technologies can be brought out for the benefit of all humanity.
One last thing is here, staying around the energy concept. You did some research. What is your visibility on how energy could be produced?
Well, I've had 10 years experience in this. You know, after we had the scientists within these black projects, which are way more advanced than what civilian scientists have come up with, willing to come forth and prove these technologies, but the congressional hearing was denied by the Bush administration. Afterward, Dr. Greer set up a corporation of which I volunteered. We had a database of about 300 scientists and inventors, civilian, you know. And so for 10 years, I flew around the planet meeting with these people, vetting these technologies. There's a lot of brilliant minds on Earth that figure out things. Ever since the Invention Secrecy Act in 1951, anybody who has free energy, anti-gravity, or whatever, they get what's called the National Security Order, which secret system within the patent office called sensitive application warning system. If your invention meets one of these criteria, you automatically get a national security order which states that your invention has been deemed to be a detriment to the national security of the United States. Therefore, you cannot share it with anyone. That's why we're still driving gasoline vehicles, why we're using these dangerous nuclear power plants. We haven't needed these oil, coal. It's all primitive, dangerous, polluting technologies that we haven't needed for decades. We have the solutions, but they've been withheld from humanity.
Even in an extreme greedy capitalist system, I have a hard time to see how this can be enforced even in a capitalist system, because there should be somebody else that says, wait, yeah, there is a lot of money to be made. We're going to go for this.
Many people can be purchased. Money is a driving factor. You have to think about the oil and energy industries are a multi-trillion-dollar industry, but it's not about just money. It's about geopolitical control. If they allow us to have this advanced technology that we won't need nuclear, oil, or coal anymore, third world countries would come up in power immediately, and you won't be able to have the control over the population.
This is what I don't understand. If you elevate more people, you will profit from that as well.
You're thinking logically. If you factor in the fact that there is a global elite who do not really care about humanity, that want to move forward on an agenda, and they control the media, and they control a lot of the finances and the technology, and then if it doesn't suit the agenda, and then it's not going to come out.
If we have this technology, let's say if we had devices to produce energy, these so-called space crystals, what changes for us? What world we would be living in if we had that?
Yeah, battery technology is rapidly changing, with yeah, I heard just recently the Chinese came up with a new battery that charges in less than 5 minutes and it gives you hundreds of miles range. And that's, threatening Tesla, because they have a different type of, lithium ferrophosphate batteries. And so, yeah, the battery technology is definitely a game changer. But just imagine if you had a 0-point energy device that you could plug into your car. You don't even need to have a battery. You don't need to recharge. Just imagine if you had anti-gravity, like in Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads. You can go anywhere. Our grid system that we all depend on, we're all feeding off these ugly wires that are running all across the planet that are EMP and CME susceptible, coronal mass ejection, that can wipe out our entire grid unless it's hardened. For example, put 0-point energy into the nuclear power plants, retrofit them, shut them down, and neutralize the radiation, and everybody could be off this clean energy without the dangers of the nuclear power plants. In the meantime, set up mass production of these little small devices that could provide multiple kilowatts to every home and business. So eventually every home and business has one. You disconnect the grid, recycle all these wires. You can take all the internal combustion engines, which are ridiculous with all the moving parts and everything that wear out, and convert them to and work with scientists that are able to convert water into fuel so you can run the vehicles on water so they don't pollute while they're being phased out and recycled. And all the electric vehicles that are out there, you put one of these little energy generators in there, and they don't need to be recharged. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of everything that would be changed. The entire corrupt medical pharmaceutical corporations would be dismantled completely, with medical centers set up with med beds where any disease whatsoever could be alleviated and extend our lives hundreds of years. And there's not overpopulation problem, because you could live in remote places on this planet normally not accessible, and you can live off planet. There's plenty of planets in our galaxy that we could move people to, and so we don't need to reduce the population. And so all these solutions exist. But when you have a small group that are controlling the media and controlling at high positions that they have for many, many decades, maybe even longer, you have a conflict against the good of all humanity versus this global elite with their agenda. And the only way this is going to turn around is through disclosure. Doing things like what you're doing, Paolo, is significant, because it's getting this information out to the public mind, to question, to do your own research, to find out, oh my God, this is true. This is not some wild conspiracy theory from somebody who's just making stuff up. This is based on facts.
These so-called Nazi, post-Nazis, the guys that went to Antarctica, they blackmailed the government, the US government, because they say, if you don't do whatever we say, we keep with this UFO, we're going to terrorize your population. And so either you do what we say, or we're going to show up in Washington, we're going to show up in New York, we're going to show up anywhere, and they will get scared, the population will get scared.
Look at 1947, what happened with Admiral Byrd, completely wiped out. He had a huge military armada go down to Antarctica to defeat the Nazi base down there. And all his aircraft were wiped out completely. And then in July of 52, they did a show of force of looked like about 9 German spacecraft that were flying over the Capitol building.
We thought they were aliens. So now you're saying those were Germans.
German, yeah.
And so they were scaring, but that's a blackmailing. That's saying, if you don't do what we say, we're going to do this in Washington, we're going to do this in New York, we're going to do this in Los Angeles, and your population will get really scared.
Right.
That's right.
And look what happened after 1955. I think it was 1956 or 57 that Operation Deep Freeze happened, where we started supplying supplies and personnel down to Antarctica. And if you look at the history and look at the sequence, the key is looking at the sequence of events and the testimonies, the documents, and the sequence of events. It starts to paint the picture that we weren't taught in school.
The other thing is a very kind of big question mark is who knows what in the government.
When I was in charge of the doing the Disclosure Project website, after I was on CNN, CBS, and all that, I put an online fax so that everybody in the world could contact their president or their representative and senator. 30,000 faxes went out to all the senators and Congress people. We met with about 24 on Capitol Hill, and all of them are out of the loop. Their responses were official Project Blue Book and NASA denials and stuff. They're completely, you can imagine if the head of intelligence of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is being denied access, these representatives and senators, they're not privy to this information.
Anyhow, so this I think was a great conversation. We covered a number of things, especially around these advanced technologies and what they could mean for us. So I personally think there is some truth here, or there's quite a bit of truth. I mean, that's it's evident to me. And what is in my mind is what we do with it. I think we should do something. We should invest. We should create companies that can bring this stuff to the world. Anyhow, Dan, thank you very much for all the people that want to take a look. Dan has a very interesting website. I'm gonna put the link down. All this information is very long, very detailed. You can go, step by step. For example, for the secret space program is the very first website. So I've seen a lot of stuff, but the problem with most people is that they don't give you the chronology. Like they don't give you the big picture. This is what happened. This is the issue at end. They all start with a very specific thing, and you're trying to wrap your mind around what they're talking about. So, Dan, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Again, it's not a professional site, just my online notes, and I, to share with other people freely so they can discover. And there's references worth everything, so they can, do the due diligence and check it out on their own. I also recommend Dr. Michael Sala's site, exopolitics.org. It does due diligence on checking out all the latest stuff that's happening. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now with the secret space program and these witnesses. So long as the elements that have been manipulating in our control are still in power, until we clean house, and the only way we can clean house is disclosure, and we need to have a certain critical mass of the public aware. And once that awareness hits a certain tipping point or precipice, then these technologies will be released. Till then, they control the media, they control a lot of the population's perceptions that have no idea and think we need rockets to go into space and think we still need gasoline and nuclear and all these obsolete technologies that have been forced upon us, while we have these incredible technologies that have been hidden for so many decades.
Very good, Dan. Thank you so much. And till next time.
My pleasure. Thank you.